Welcome, my friends, to Woke Minds with the Wizard of LA. My name is Cenzi, and I'm a wizard. What is a wizard, though? In this episode, entitled The Wizard, the Shaman, the Magician, the Mystic, and more, we're going to explore these terminologies in such a way as they have meaning to our discussions here. Whenever we're talking about language and the nature of how language operates, we need to be aware that words are symbols. They're actually mega symbols, if you think about it, because the word is made up of letters, which are individual symbols. So you see the word put together, and it can have multiple meanings. And in this place where you might see multiple meanings, you can have a language that two individuals speak that is the same, and yet they are not speaking the same based on how they define that context of the symbol. To put it simply, a symbol is neutral. So is a word, until it is given something to charge it, to give it an intention or a meaning. And over the course of time, certain words or symbols or definitions emerge out of a common well or reservoir, a common knowledge base that is shared, or a belief system, or a paradigm that is shared among individuals. So this becomes a type of shorthand for communication. And this is assuming that it is functioning correctly, that these individuals speaking the same language are also defining the words in that language in a similar fashion. So this is a pretty big topic, and there are wealths of disciplines, academic and otherwise, that just deal with the structure of language and how it creates things. And it's very relevant to the concepts of magic and what that actually is. We'll talk more about the definitions, as we did a little bit in the introduction, as to what magic is and how it functions. So the important thing to realize here is not so much to be hung up on a particular definition of a word. Different people throughout the world, throughout history, have changed the definitions of words, or have adopted unique definitions based on how they have processed reality. That part is a given. It's a given. Everyone is perceiving and coming to the table based on their own level of knowledge. They can only think consciously as far as they actually know. So if they only know a word to have one meaning, they will not consciously be aware that it has multiple meanings. The idea of a wizard and what the definition is, and there's several, and it's interesting because the common definition is that a wizard is a wise man or a sage. Now, a sage is often defined as someone who's mastered their senses. They become unshakable because they are a self-master. Sometimes a wizard is defined as someone who is skilled in magic or sorcery, Now, magic and sorcery may have been used interchangeably before, though in the context of this language they are not, and this is because sorcery is used in the way of a baneful context, whereby the sorcerer seeks to perform magic in such a way that violates another's free will. So it has a darker connotation in my world and association. I'm not the only one there. That's not unique to me, though that's also not uniform. So not everyone uses it that way. So you can see already where this is getting complex. And I haven't even gotten to the point to define what a magician is to you, even though these are all relative. Because is a wizard a magician? Well, yes, it is. It's one who's skilled in magic. Though what's a magician? Well, we're going to get to that. Though there's a third definition of a wizard, which is much more commonly spoken of in circles not related to the practices of magic, and that is in the way of saying that it is a clever person or someone who is very skilled at something. So the example for that that's pretty common is when someone's a computer whiz or a wizard at math or some other type of skill that they're good at, that they're often equated as being a wizard. So when I define myself, I fit all three of those definitions. Well, I won't claim a wise man because I think at the point that I did, I would become unwise. So I'll claim 2 out of 3, which ain't bad when you think about it. I think that as a practitioner of magic and a clever or skillful person, which I'll own that, that is enough for me. I could have taken 1. I'll take 3. And I didn't give myself that name. That was given to me. And so I took that title. And I like it. And that's other episodes where we explain what I actually do with that that's meaningful to you and to others, because it's important to me. So the next definition that's worth covering, and that is the most personal to me, because I think it is the origin point of my relationship with magic and metaphysics, which is meta, beyond or above, physica, the physical world, something I have been associated with my entire life. The invisible and the unseen things and forces and places have been a reoccurrent theme for me, and they've been a major influence and driver in my life. And really what is more accurate to the term of my origin is that of the mystic. And so what is the mystic? Well, the mystic practices mysticism. And if you go to the dictionary, the first definitions that may pop up are someone that seeks contemplation and self-surrender to obtain unity with or absorption with the deity or the absolute, or who believes in spiritual apprehension of truths that are beyond the intellect. So I'm just reaching out and using the first definition here that you might come to, and then I'm going to explain it more so in my own terms. because a mystic is one that is interfacing with a force or a power that is beyond the self. So it is beyond just a physical person. It is beyond the realm of the material. And so this force is often associated with what is termed God, or the divine, or the universe, or it could be a supreme intelligence, or it's really however you want to define it, though it's really about knowing this from an experiential level. So the mystic seeks to know this experience of the absolute or the deity, to know what it's like to touch God. And this was my first mystical experience as a small child, knowing this, having this type of experience, independent of religion, of which it can be associated with. This is a experiential experience. It's something that is had in a way of inner knowing, and it's intuitive. So it's not like reading a book and doing a spell. It often results in ecstatic states. Ecstatic meaning ecstasy, physically feeling sensations and changes in the body. And that's what mysticism is about, is achieving those states, having that union. Now, as a result of that union, many things can happen that would be considered paranormal or metaphysical. It's beyond a physical perception, because in the experience you've tapped into something else. And this is what it is like from this subjective reality. So I'm not here to sell anyone on this and tell you, oh, this is real, if you're not already on board with that. What I'm doing is explaining what this is like for me, who has done it and proofed it for myself. And so there are changes that occur within the thought, within the body, within the very nature of reality. And so you know what you know. And these early formative experiences for myself really opened a curiosity for me to dig deeper into the worlds of magic. And I was very blessed to have the influence of my grandfather, who was an enlightened being, I believe, in so many regards, because he was a metaphysicist himself. And I was learning about many of these concepts at a very young age. And so that was an important point for me when I am 7 years old and going to seminars about how to have out-of-body experiences, and I'm having access to libraries of knowledge and thought philosophies of unlimited potential. That's going to color your worldview. If you have a seed of belief that your potential is unlimited, then you're giving yourself the ability to grow into that belief. If you want a guest to come into your house, you invite them, you have to open the door, which means your mind door has to be open if you want that guest, that new way to live, to come in. So these mystical experiences that can be had can take many different forms. Body ecstasy is very common, hyperarousal, changes in physiology based on different experiences in the senses. There are other ways as well that have to do with going completely internal. Quite often, people that are on psychedelic influences have mystical experiences or perceive them as such, where they journey inward and effectively go outward because they discover that within them is the mirror of the outside, which is an esoteric truth. The relationship between the microcosm and the macrocosm. And if you've ever seen fractals or the Mandelbrot set, you can visualize this and apply it to your own experience of going inward and reaching the outside. And so that brings me to the next definition, that of the shaman. And this is something that I identify very closely with, and has become a hotly charged word in recent times because of a number of erroneous beliefs about what that actually is. And the shaman as a word, or as a origin of the word, or the first people that it applied to, may have come from Siberia or parts of North or East Asia and North America it's associated with. And some people basically think that the only way you could be a shaman is if you were trained, and maybe your skin tone has to be a certain level of darkness in order for you to qualify. And this is false. The shaman is a intuitive type of magician, arguably the basis for all magical systems that followed, because they came from an intuition and they came from a internal knowing or gnosis that had to do with patterns of the universe and recognizing them. That the shaman is specific in a few notable ways to some of the other terms that we've defined here. And that has to do with the shamanic calling, and the nature of the work. Because while they all may be experiencing the commonality of magick or mysticism, the shaman in particular is associated with working with spirits and other worlds. And they are often associated with healing as well. So, the idea being that the shaman has touched different worlds. And the calling is not considered a choice. So to be a shaman, one is born that way. And it may not manifest at birth. It may take a near-death experience or an existential crisis. It's something called shamanic sickness. And I believe there are many shaman out there right now that have not been aware that that's what they are. They don't know that there's a word for what they went through, because they basically are wounded healers like myself. They got hurt and they came back and they were reborn, either because they had a physical near-death experience or they had a psychical or mental experience that was so traumatizing or trying to them that when they came back, they were different enough that they were weird or spooky, or in a very classical sense. Not necessarily in the way that they dress or how they generally act, though they probably are, because you don't get to come back the same way. It's like once you've seen something and you don't unsee it because you carry it with you. And so they're associated with healing and death and rebirth, which is part of the reason why they have a peculiar association with the cultures that they're in. And so you'll often see them as tricksters or fools or heroes, villains even. Though healing is a major association with the shaman, and some of the things they do also include psychopumping, which is a position, and I do this myself, where those that have died are guided to the next place that they need to go. That this is a process in the domain of the shaman, that there was something, sort of the way that a priest would function, because that's effectively what we're talking about here, would be a tribal priest, where not all priests have books. And they don't have to be from a specific region. The word may have come from that. Though to limit it like this, in my opinion, is sort of like saying, well, you can't eat a burrito if you didn't get it in Mexico. It's not a burrito anymore if you take it across the border. So a lot of the arguments against it and the way that people have taken offense, which sometimes they have, are erroneous to me and not in my world. I see it as a term of distinction that I share with my friends, and some of them anyway, that are healers that basically have gone through a lot of pain and trauma to do it. It's not really a cool thing, actually, which is the funny part. Like, it seems like it could be cool if you are into these concepts of working your will and doing this stuff. It's not the best straw to draw, because some of these other terminologies, to split hairs, they are elective. So you are choosing to do those things. With the shaman, it doesn't feel like a choice. It's like you're the guy babysitting the drunk outside that's throwing up instead of being in at the party, chatting up the person you want to be with. Like, that's like a shaman thing to do something like that. Or quite often they take the hit for the team, though it's not universal that way, though it's a common registry mark, I would say, that happens. And a lot of the way that the magic is gone about is in a very intuitive way. So there's ritual, and it's worth noting that it is carried down through a hereditary method as well. So this is something that people do get trained, father to son or tribal elder to younger. It is an initiatory type of magic and system, though it is also something that one may be initiated by beings beyond. So it's interesting because for me, I am in contact with the presence of that archetype that is not in this time. In other words, I'm at the council with the old men and women, even though I'm here in my physical body, because I am aware that I'm not just here. And my mind and my energy and my being is not purely contained in this physical form. So there have been times where in extreme crisis, I felt their presence and actually received guidance and wisdom that kept me alive, literally kept me alive in life-threatening situations. Because they were there and knew, because this process has gone through. And if anyone who has experienced this, that listens to this, I think they may know what I'm talking about. In any time where you were on the edge of something, where there was a very tight spot or a situation that you could actually feel that presence or hear it or see it, or basically become aware with the senses that you were not alone, and that there were others that were like you, and that they were helping you from another place. And that's what it's like. And it's been very comforting. And I have a few stories for another time about how some of those interactions have gone. And that it's the nearest one like this might get to true family beyond the blood, because it is something that exists. It's a conversation throughout time. And so if there is a choice, I think it's done before one incarnates. It's an elective that's taken, that you're going to take that path before you touch down and you're here and become any kind of a guide. Though it is a magician in the truest sense of the word, which is a person with magical powers. Or is it a person that performs tricks? It's interesting, because the word is so charged with baggage. And so we're told, if we go back to its origins, that it came from magus in Latin. Before that, magi in Persia and Greece. It was in use that long ago. And it may have meant something as simple as someone else's religion, or able to do the rituals. It was effectively the prayers and religious rites that were being done at the time, and it didn't have a positive connotation associated with it at every point in time, and still doesn't, funny enough. Though really, in modern times, because here's where we unravel it in the most broadest strokes in this podcast. I'm sure you could take really years discussing this, and many scholars and others have gone over it. And so this concludes the first part of the episode, The Wizard, the Shaman, the Magician, the Mystic, and more. And I invite you to come back for more episodes as we continue in this series of defining our process. If you found this content to be helpful or useful or beneficial to you in any way, I invite you to donate to my PayPal, thewizardofla@gmail.com. That's thewizardofla@gmail.com. No gift is too small. All are appreciated. I am grateful for any help I receive so that I may continue to give you new and amazing content. And I invite you to like and subscribe and tell your friends about this podcast. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought, what you'd like to know, and have discussion. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this journey, and look forward to sharing with you again